Thanks for having me tonight. I'm Matt Fabry. I manage the countywide water pollution prevention program, and I'm going to talk about stormwater and what we're doing in terms of some of the issues that Supervisor Pine talked about in terms of the pollution issues, and talk about green infrastructure as an emerging solution to deal with some of our problems. We call ourselves SMCWIP, which is not a great name, and so. We are a program of the City-County Association of Governments, or CCAG, which is a joint powers agency of the 21 municipalities in the county. And really, our program's job is to support the 21 agencies in meeting the requirements that come out of the state in terms of keeping pollution out of our storm drains and from getting into the bay, into the ocean, and into our creeks. And so we do some of the compliance activities for those folks when it makes sense to do them at a countywide level. And a lot of what we do is having consultants provide technical support to the cities to implement their own local programs. So what's the big deal with stormwater? Mostly its urbanization has resulted in a lot of hardscape and a lot of pollution. And so when we have impervious surfaces, you don't get as much infiltration of stormwater, and so you get some of the issues that Supervisor Pine talked about in terms of leading to more flow leaving our impervious surfaces and going to our creeks, causing flooding issues. And it also does a good job of washing these pollutants away that we spread across all of our urbanized areas. So it all flows into our storm drain inlets and then into underground pipes, and it goes directly out to creeks in the bay or the ocean without any form of treatment, which is still an issue that we still work on educating the general public, that a lot of people think that the drains in the street go to this wastewater treatment plant. So there's no treatment whatsoever of stormwater before it goes out to our water bodies. And that ends up being very bad for water quality, human health, aquatic life, and aesthetics as a result of various pollutants and the flow issues. So this is sort of what things looked like before we came along and messed things up. And when it would rain, you'd have a lot more infiltration. Whether these numbers are right, I don't know, but we get much more infiltration and interflow underground that goes to recharge creeks. You get a very small amount of surface flow, and you get a lot of evapotranspiration. And then we came along and paved things over, and we get minimal infiltration at this point, very limited interflow, limited evapotranspiration, and then we get a lot of surface flow going into our piping system. And so in terms of pollutants, there's a whole, just about anything you could think of can end up in stormwater, since we have sort of an open system. But this is sort of a list of the things that we're dealing with of different pollutants, and flow is even an issue in terms of things like San Francisco Creek that are still natural creeks. If you've got too much flow, you end up eroding those creeks and causing destabilization of the creeks and impacts on the creeks in that fashion. So even flow is an issue. But the pollutants that we are really dealing with at this point under our regional stormwater requirements are trash, mercury, and PCBs. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those. So trash, the biggest impacts is that it has impacts on aquatic life. It can be ingested by animals thinking that it's food. You've all seen pictures of birds with, six-pack plastic rings around their necks. And it's bad in terms of aesthetics if you want to go out and enjoy a beach or a creek and there's trash everywhere. It comes from a lot of sources. It comes from people that litter. We get a certain amount that gets released into the environment through our waste hauling process. If people overfill their trash cans or it falls off the trash trucks as they're hauling things, we get illegal dumping. We've got problems with homeless encampments that end up discharging a lot of material. And so the permit that we're under basically says that we have to eliminate the impacts of trash on our receiving waters by 2022, which is a pretty significant challenge, given that we've tried to deal with the trash and litter problem for decades and haven't been successful. And so now we're being forced to do it through a stormwater permit. And this is going to require source control. We've done a lot in San Mateo County on like plastic bag bans and polystyrene foam food container bans, which are prevalent litter products. It's going to require a certain amount of interception and treatment within the storm drain systems, and a lot of on-land cleanups and other creek cleanups and things like that. Mercury and PCBs are a different type of problem. They are found in bay fish and at levels that are human health hazard, so it's not safe to eat certain fish out of the bay at all, and some fish you're only recommended to eat them on a limited frequency. Mercury is sort of a legacy issue from a lot of the mining activities during the gold rush. but it's also an ongoing problem. We've got aerial deposition of mercury coming from coal-fired power plants in China that blows across the ocean and then deposits on all of our impervious surfaces. It's very low concentrations, but it's everywhere, and so cumulatively it ends up being a large loading to the bay. PCBs were used extensively in industry. They're now banned since 1980, I believe, but they're still found throughout the urban environment. And we're required to achieve significant reductions in both mercury and PCBs on sort of a little bit longer timeline, but not that much different than trash. And so this is really going to be, about, especially with PCBs, if we can find contaminated properties that are ongoing sources, we got to get those cleaned up. But ultimately, we're going to be looking at potentially doing some level of stormwater treatment to deal with these things. So as Supervisor Pine mentioned, there are a lot of other issues with regard to stormwater. We've got drought, El Nino, and climate change. And so I think what we're finding in terms of the drought is that communities are looking to have more sustainable, diverse water supplies than just relying on the Hetch Hetchy system. There's renewed interest in groundwater. I think East Palo Alto is looking at putting in their own groundwater well to provide a more diverse system for themselves. With El Nino, there's potential significant precipitation coming this year. And then we've got potential for increased flood impacts. As Supervisor Pine mentioned, we had storms just last year that caused significant flooding problems, and if we get a significant El Nino year, that could be a lot worse. And then with climate change, we may get more intense precipitation and more frequent storms. And then with the rising seas, we've got rising tides means it's harder for the water from the watersheds to get out into the bay, and so it's going to have to go somewhere, and so we're going to end up with more flooding problems. And so stormwater plays a role in all of these. So in terms of the solution, what we're really finding is that these are very challenging and very costly problems for us to address. There's a lot of pollutants with very challenging to control sources, especially with things like trash and litter. They're all sort of tied to the impacts from urbanization and climate issues, and so we need to really come up with more sustainable, resilient urban areas to deal with all these issues that have been talked about tonight. And so, what can we do in that regard with stormwater? And green infrastructure is emerging as sort of the multi-benefit solution. So what's green infrastructure? And really it's using natural systems to capture, treat, and infiltrate stormwater. So you've got landscaped areas where stormwater will flow in, pond up, infiltrate into the ground, and be treated by the soils and filtration, and then hopefully also recharge groundwater. So it sort of restores that natural stormwater management regime that we saw before urbanization. They typically end up being distributed small-scale systems where we've got small systems throughout the urbanized areas. And they're multi-benefit, including for these water issues that we've been talking about for climate change, flooding, and groundwater recharge. So can we get to more of a balanced approach where we're never going to get back to mostly infiltration, but can we drastically increase the amount of infiltration and interflow and really increase the evapotranspiration so that we're really reducing the amount of surface flow that we have going into our system. So here's some examples of stuff that's been done already in San Mateo County. This is a rain garden that was installed funded by our program at City of Brisbane City Hall as part of their City Hall remodel. So this large rain garden captures runoff from the adjacent parking lot and some of the roof from the City Hall building and infiltrates it into the ground. This is a project that we funded in Burlingame on Donnelly Avenue, which is one block off of Burlingame Avenue, where we put in a very large rain garden that takes parking lot runoff and roof runoff from some of the buildings on Burlingame Avenue, and then there's a curb extension out in the street that captures and manages runoff from the roadway. In San Carlos, they recently did a series of curb extensions on Old County Road, in addition to some pedestrian improvements with wider sidewalks and pedestrian scale lighting and new crosswalks and curb ramps. Burlingame Avenue, they did their massive streetscape improvements project, and they put in vegetated curb extensions at the intersections to capture stormwater. There's my 3-year-old photobombing my picture. City of San Mateo, just down the street from where we are tonight on Delaware Street, they did a road diet where this used to be 2 lanes in each direction plus a center turn lane. They got rid of 1 lane in each direction and just have 1 lane in each direction plus a center turn lane. So they added bike lanes, they did wider sidewalks, and they put in this long vegetated system that captures and infiltrates stormwater. This is our most recent project that we funded. It was a partnership with the Foster City San Mateo School District, and we did a combined Safe Routes to School stormwater management project where we looked at what were the needs in terms of safe routes to school, of getting kids safely to school, and they identified things like they needed a new mid-block crosswalk, and so we put in, mid-block crosswalk in addition to curb extensions that manage stormwater. We put in rain gardens on the school campus that capture roof runoff from the building and the parking lot. So it's sort of integrating multiple funding sources to get these things done more cost effectively. So there's major planning ahead in the stormwater world that I want to talk about. One is that we are going to be doing a countywide stormwater resource plan, and this is going to be looking at what are the opportunities for capturing and utilizing stormwater to benefit water supply and water quality issues. And so it's really looking at where are the locations where we can do things, where we can put in these sorts of systems to help recharge groundwater, reduce pollution issues, looking at that at sort of a countywide level. And then this permit that we're under is going to mandate that all of the cities in the county develop what are called green infrastructure plans, and those are intended to sort of show over time, how do we transform our drainage systems from our current flood control-based systems to more sustainable drainage systems, and looking at it over a multi-decade time period. And so this is going to be something where the cities are going to have to integrate green infrastructure with other plans and priorities, including things like their complete streets or bike and pedestrian plans, so that things that I've shown you, that as you're doing pedestrian improvements, you're also incorporating stormwater improvements at the same time. They're going to have to look at climate change and resiliency issues, groundwater recharge, flood control issues. All that's going to get rolled into these green infrastructure plans. So it's sort of a huge opportunity driven by a stormwater permit to sort of create more sustainable, resilient communities. And ultimately, we have to demonstrate that we're going to achieve sort of these reductions in mercury and PCBs by implementation of those plans over the long term. So how can you folks help? I'd love for you to get involved in those planning efforts. The Stormwater Resource Plan is going to be a countywide effort, but the green infrastructure plans are going to be more at the local level, so every city is going to be doing one, so you can all get involved depending on where you live. I encourage you to visit our website at flowstobay.org. We've got a lot of resources there for everything you want to know about stormwater and pollution issues, from things that you can do in your garden to washing your car to capturing rain. So there's a lot of resources on there. I encourage you to follow us on social media. I get 15 minutes up here to talk to you one time, but I'd love to have you engage with us on an ongoing basis in these evolving conversations. So, take out your phones right now and follow us at Flows to Bay on Facebook and Twitter. Get involved in community cleanup events that would help us, with the trash issues. If you do gardening, look at using less toxic products for pest control. There's a program called Our Water, Our World, where we partner with a lot of the stores in the county to highlight what the less toxic pest control products are. And so you'll see things on the shelves that highlight what those products are. And so I encourage you to do that. Simple things like picking up after your pets. I encourage people to install a rain barrel. Our program is partnering with Bosco to provide rebates countywide. So anywhere you live in the county, if you install a rain barrel, you can get a $50 per barrel rebate from our program. In areas where the water purveyor is also participating, they're matching those rebates. And so in a lot of places in the county, you can get a $100 per barrel rebate, which basically means you can get a rain barrel for free. So anyway, that's everything I have, so I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Who did that? Oh, in Santa Monica. Yeah, so the question was, Santa Monica built a urban stormwater capture and treatment facility, and do we have any plans to do anything like that? I don't think at this point that we do. I think in Southern California, they were dealing with a lot of dry weather runoff issues and a lot of bacteria issues, and they've got world-class beaches down there that are a major tourist draw and financial incentive, and so I think that was a lot of the driver that they saw with doing that. It's a very expensive facility that they put in, but it's solving a lot of their problems. I don't think that we necessarily have the infrastructure to do that kind of system that would make sense financially, but I think ultimately everything's on the table. Yes.
$100 rebate for the rain barrel, and that's for usually low volume rain
Right.
barrels. So that's a pretty significant ratio. Is there any thought behind similar ratios for larger volume tanks?
Yeah.
Because they actually are quite impressive what they can do contributing costs.
Yeah, we started the program, it basically started a year ago in October, and so we decided we were going to start small and just go with the rain barrels at this point, but I think we are looking at, as we continue, and if we continue to see interest and support in the program, at looking at providing rebates for larger cisterns and things like that that people can do. Oops. Like the event center, you know, putting in a 5,000 gallon tank, you know, that's great, but most people don't have room for it. But, you know, in a lot of houses, you may have room to do more, like a 100 gallon or a 500 gallon tank. I don't have room at my house to do that, so I'm going to stick with the 50 gallon. But I think, you know, what we're finding is that the rebates, especially in places where we've got the matching rebate from the water purveyors, we're getting about double the amount of barrels installed in those areas. So the financial incentives definitely make a difference, and we found that sort of rainwater harvesting, even though in a lot of cases with our Mediterranean climate where we get all of our rain for 6 months straight and then we're dry for 6 months straight, sometimes the rainwater harvesting doesn't make as much sense as it does in other parts of the world. But it's sort of a gateway type of thing that people like to do it, and it gets them going on other conservation and other pollution prevention issues. So we see it as valuable of trying to support that. Yes?
Over the last 10 years, Observatory has been putting in more and more of these artificial turf fields. Have you been noticing any negative impact on the pollutants, the ground-up tires that are used to fluff up the fields and all that?
Yeah, I can't really comment too intelligently on it other than the stuff that I've read in news articles. I haven't been directly involved. I know that there are concerns, like you say, that with ground-up tires, that there are things like zinc that are problems with tires, and that there could be potential leaching of those pollutants, but I don't have direct information about whether or not we're seeing those problems or not. It's a delicate balance. You know, I know cities are trying to save water and provide fields that people can use all the time, but it's sort of a balance of you know, what are the potential environmental issues associated with those. And I know there's issues with heat and fields being really hot and things like that. So, yeah. So, anything else? Okay, thank you very much.